So you want to know the good and bad of living in Johns Creek? Well, you've come to the right place. I have a long list of pros and cons of living in Johns Creek. So if you're running short on time, this video will have a timestamp and chapter list so that you can get to the sections of the video that you want to get to. But I do hope you will stay for the entire video. So let's get right to it and get into the negatives of living in Johns Creek. One of the biggest negatives of living in Johns Creek are the housing costs. The housing costs are one of the highest in Georgia. As of this recording being made in January of 2022, according to the FMLS, the last full month of data being December of 2021, the median price of homes in Johns Creek is $695,000. Compare that median price to the average price of homes in Johns Creek, which is $890,000. Now, I know those viewers in California, New York, and Seattle regard Georgia home prices as being very reasonable. But for the rest of us in the southeast United States, Johns Creek price of homes are considered very high. In fact, it's downright intimidating to many people looking to buy a home. If you're looking to buy a home and move into the Johns Creek area in 2022, your household is going to have above average income in order to afford to buy the home. Along with the high price of homes in Johns Creek comes the property taxes. When the value of your home is higher, the property taxes you pay will also be higher. But fortunately in Georgia, if you're a real estate property owner, you do have the ability to get a 3-year tax freeze. The way you get that 3-year property tax freeze is by going through the tax appeal process. I don't want to get sidetracked by talking about Georgia's 3-year tax freeze and Georgia's tax appeal process, but you can go look at my playlist where I have several videos where I discuss the topic and how to get your 3-year tax freeze. Another negative of living in Johns Creek are gas prices are generally very high. I almost never buy gas in Johns Creek unless I absolutely have to. And oftentimes I will go to the Sam's Club in Alpharetta where they have the best gas prices in the general area. How I determine gas prices is by using the phone app Gas Buddy. I compare Johns Creek to the surrounding areas of Alpharetta, Duluth, Cumming, and Suwanee. As of this recording, Johns Creek is at $3.13 per gallon, whereas the surrounding areas I listed are right under $3 per gallon. If you're just driving around locally, it's not really a big deal in the big scheme of things. If you're putting on a lot of miles driving around in your car, you probably want to have better gas prices. Another negative about living in Johns Creek is if you have to commute to downtown Atlanta. Now, it's not often I have to make the drive to downtown Atlanta from Johns Creek, but when I do, it's really a slog and feels like a very long drive. The actual distance from Johns Creek to downtown Atlanta is roughly 30 to 33 miles, depending on which part of Johns Creek you're driving from and the route you take. And that's for a one-way trip. In terms of time, a good drive time is 45 minutes, but I typically allow for an hour each way. And gosh help you if you're stuck in rush hour traffic. The drive times are even worse. So I really hate to say this, but if you're planning on commuting or working in downtown Atlanta, I don't think Johns Creek is really the best place to buy in terms of drive and commute time. I recommend you look at areas closer to the highway or closer to downtown Atlanta. The next negative I want to discuss is traveling from Johns Creek to the Atlanta International Airport. Now, I realize that not everyone travels, but for people like me who do travel for both work and pleasure, looking at the travel logistics from traveling to Johns Creek to the Atlanta International Airport is certainly a factor. Traveling to the Atlanta International Airport is approximately 35 to 40 miles, depending on which route you take. It can be anywhere between 45 minutes and 90 minutes, depending on the time of day and the traffic. Your travel time to the airport will be greatly influenced by weather conditions as well as any accidents that might be occurring around that time. I can tell you that when you make the drive from Johns Creek to the Atlanta airport, it can be stressful and you never know what you're going to get the day you travel. But to err on the conservative side, I tell people to allow 60 to 90 minutes for drive time to the Atlanta airport. Another negative for me, for anyone choosing to live in Johns Creek, is the fact that there are no warehouse clubs in Johns Creek. There are no Costco's, there are no Sam's Clubs, there are no BJ's Wholesale Club in Johns Creek. You actually have to go to a neighboring city to get to your favorite warehouse club. On top of that, do you know that Johns Creek has no Targets or Walmarts within its city limits? Again, you have to leave the city limits of Johns Creek to get to Target or Walmart for your day-to-day shopping needs. Personally, I really wish some of these brand name big box stores are a little bit closer to Johns Creek, and so I list that as a negative, but it's not a horrible negative that you can't overcome. Whether you want to get to the warehouse clubs or the Walmarts or the Targets, you have to drive to Duluth, Alpharetta, Cumming, or Suwanee, which surrounds the Johns Creek area. Another interesting negative for those of you who like retail shopping is there are no malls in Johns Creek. There are plenty of strip centers and shopping centers, but there is no mall in Johns Creek. The closest mall to Johns Creek is North Point Mall in Alpharetta. Another negative about Johns Creek is it's not a destination city. Not only is it not a destination city, it's somewhat landlocked from the major highways. And so if you decide to live in Johns Creek, you're going to find a lot of congestion with the local traffic. But a lot of that local traffic is not local. A lot of the traffic are people passing through Johns Creek, going from one end of North Atlanta to another. For example, there are many destination areas in Duluth, Georgia, and Alpharetta. But in order to travel and make that crossing, you generally have to cross over Johns Creek. So there's a lot of crisscross traffic going on that is not necessarily from the locals. Another negative for many residents of Johns Creek is that there is no local attractions. Not only there are no local attractions, there is no downtown area or city center area. And for people who want to get out on the weekends and do something, you often have to leave the Johns Creek area. And actually, this is a hot issue being discussed by Johns Creek City Council members today. There are some who don't want to develop Johns Creek even further, and there are others who do to attract more business and increase the taxpayer base. But as I make this recording in January of 2022, there is no downtown area, there is no city center, and there are no major attractions in Johns Creek. All of these I consider to be a negative. Another negative about living in Johns Creek, which is actually quite small in the scheme of things, but I find it particularly annoying, is that there is a local newspaper which dumps or delivers their weekly paper onto people's driveways. There have been a lot of complaints about this because a lot of people don't want the papers. They especially don't want the papers if they leave the home frequently for any given amount of time or if the house is vacant. Having a local paper dumped on someone's driveway week after week gets a bit old. For the people who want the paper, it's a great little service. For the rest of us, it's just simply having somebody dumping a piece of trash on our driveway every week. You just can't opt out whether you want the paper or not. Now that I'm done discussing the negatives of Johns Creek, I'm happy to move on to the positives of Johns Creek. Now, the first thing I'm going to discuss is not a clear-cut positive or clear-cut negative about Johns Creek. But the fact of the matter is, if you're going to be living and moving into Johns Creek, you're going to have to accept that the vast majority of homes available for sale are in HOAs. And if you're like me, who come from traditionally non-HOA neighborhoods, it can be quite jarring. And when you come into Johns Creek and start traveling around the neighborhoods, you will see that the vast majority of homes are in HOA neighborhoods. But I think that for many people, the fact that Johns Creek has so many HOA homes is largely a positive. And so let me explain why so many people view it as a positive. HOA neighborhoods generally have some nice amenities for their residents to enjoy. HOA neighborhoods ensure that all its residents comply to a certain level of standard in maintaining the exterior of their property and their yards. Many HOA neighborhoods in Johns Creek don't allow for rentals. There are many residents of HOA neighborhoods who feel that having rentals in the neighborhood do not help property values. HOA neighborhoods tend to allow for a certain level of stability and consistency, which many residents prefer. Having said all that, on a personal level, I definitely see some downsides of HOAs. HOAs is a mixed bag. I'm not into mandatory annual HOA fees that all residents have to pay. I'm also not a fan of HOA fees for amenities that I never use. I'm also not a fan of HOA because of how little land that you get. Many HOA neighborhoods have homes that are relatively close to another. We can talk for hours about the pros and cons of HOAs. If you're going to buy a home and move into Johns Creek, you're going to have to deal with them. And if you're unwilling to deal with HOAs, you should probably look for a home outside of Johns Creek. The next positive of Johns Creek is the fact that Johns Creek is predominantly a homeowner's city. According to the U.S. Census website, over 76% of households in Johns Creek are occupied by homeowners. And that means that 3 out of 4 households are occupied by homeowners. Slightly less than 1 in 4 households are occupied by renters. And because the price of homes in Johns Creek is very high compared to most Georgia cities, the standard of living in Johns Creek is generally considered to be very high. Part of being in the Johns Creek area means that there is greater funding for the local schools. In fact, one of the reasons why people move into Johns Creek is because of the local school system. Johns Creek high schools routinely win awards every year. And I do have a couple of videos if you want to learn more about Johns Creek high schools and the awards they've received. Regardless of the reason, Johns Creek schools simply have an excellent reputation, and it is one of the primary drivers of why parents choose to live in Johns Creek. Another thing that I really like about Johns Creek is that it is a clean and well-maintained city. What I mean by Johns Creek being a clean city is that you just don't see very much litter, trash, or pollution no matter where you drive. Also, I consider Johns Creek to be very well maintained in the fact that there are very few potholes and rundown roads. Johns Creek, in terms of the quality of its roads, is a far cry from the more central and more busy Atlanta, where there are always potholes. Potholes in Atlanta are infamous for people who know the area. In Johns Creek, you generally don't have to deal with all the pothole nonsense, and it's a wonderful thing. Another great thing about Johns Creek, which goes to its quality of life, is that there is an abundance of choices for grocery shopping. Predominantly, you will see Kroger and Publix's every couple miles. It seems like no matter where I go in Johns Creek, I find a convenient grocery store around. Another feature that many residents of Johns Creek enjoys are the local parks. Johns Creek has several parks in which its residents enjoy for one reason or another. Every park is a little bit different, and people are drawn to them for different reasons. I've driven by them, and they always seem to be clean and well maintained. Another interesting thing that I've learned from the U.S. Census Bureau website regarding Johns Creek is that Johns Creek residents have one of the highest broadband internet access in Georgia. Nearly 97% of Johns Creek residents have broadband internet access. And because of this high level of internet broadband access, there is competition in the area. As I make this video, we're paying $35 a month for fiber internet access, which is really an unbelievable rate. But that was only made possible because more than one internet access provider decided to compete in the market. In Johns Creek, high-speed internet access is literally in almost everyone's household. That is a far contrast from many areas in Georgia. If you're interested and intrigued about Johns Creek, I recommend you check out this playlist. This playlist has several videos of what real Johns Creek neighborhoods look like in HOA neighborhoods. If you want to see more Johns Creek videos, please subscribe to this channel and leave a comment below. And I will see you in my next video.